Congressman, what are your expectations for the Geneva arms talks?
Well, I think the talks will be successful. I'm delighted that we're talking. I think it's obvious that the Strategic Defense Initiative got the Soviets to come to the bargaining table. And while there's been a lot of posturing lately, I think finally when the leaders get behind closed doors, we will have some effective action on arms reduction.
But do you think that the SDI program could be a stumbling block for any long-term agreement with the Soviets?
I think the Soviets understand that they have their own SDI program, and again, it goes back to the public posturing on this issue. I think ultimately that the SDI program has to be discussed because we can't lose this opportunity to get meaningful arms reductions. But we have to understand that what we're talking about in SDI is basically a research program, and the Soviets have been doing it for years. Again, it's the very thing that got them to the negotiating table, and I feel that the President will handle that issue judiciously, and when the opening comes, it may come up for discussion.
Do you have any other topics that you think President Reagan should cover with General Secretary Gorbachev, besides arms control?
Yeah, I think it's important to come to some understanding with the Soviet Union about their violations of prior accords. And the one that I'm most concerned about is the Helsinki Agreement, which was signed in 1975. Human rights issues, I think, are an important consideration, especially when you consider that the Soviet Jews are in effect being held hostage to the arms race. The emigration has gone down from literally thousands back in the 70s to just a trickle right now. And I think that we are deserved an explanation as to why the Soviets not living up to their prior agreements, especially on this human rights issue. I think the bottom line is how can you trust them on other issues or other treaties and agreements if you can't see them fulfilling the ones that they've signed already?
What's going on with the Gramm-Rudman balanced budget plan right now?
Not enough. It seems to me that we need a deficit reduction act more than anything else. And there's been too much partisan politics being played. You know, last week I was delighted to see that we were coming to a vote on the Gramm-Rudman Act. And what happened at the last hour was that the Democrats decided to come up with their own version. And on last Friday, not even having the opportunity to read their act, we were forced to vote on theirs as opposed to the Deficit Reduction Act we've been talking about, which passed the Senate for the last several weeks. So I hope that we come to some agreement in conference. That's where it stands right now. And as you know, temporarily, we've had to raise again the debt limit, something that I don't like to see without having it tied in with the Deficit Reduction Act. But I myself voted for it because I wanted to at least get the President off to Geneva, figuring that when he got back we could then deal with the entire issue. But I hope that the conference that we set up on this issue comes to a partisan or bipartisan compromise that we can all support, because the public needs it. We've gone too long now with deficits that are too big, and I think the public's entitled to know that we're going to get our act together. And a 5-year plan, a la Gramm-Rudman, I think is a good way to approach this.
Well, no one's talking about tax reform anymore. Is this issue dead for the rest of the year?
Just turn off my thing here. Excuse me?
Go ahead, answer that. Do you think tax reform is dead for the year?
I think tax reform certainly is a distant second to the budget deficit. And my feeling is that with the compromises that are now being made in the House Ways and Means Committee, in order for the chairman to be able to get that bill out of committee, that we may be seeing the death knell of tax reform. The reform bill is now being routinely referred to as deform because of the many compromises that have to be made to the special interest groups to get the bill out of committee. So, number one, I think that tax reform is not the issue, it's the deficit. Number two, for many reasons, I think this particular tax reform bill is not what we need. I don't think it's fair. It's certainly not fair to New York State without the deductibility of New York State taxes, the income taxes and the real estate taxes. It's a highly complex bill. We've gone far away from tax simplification. I don't see that it right now is helping us with the deficit. And I don't see an economic model. Number four, that gives me the impression that this bill is based on a growth model to continue the growth cycle in this country. And finally, it seems to me that we need a bill that will encourage personal savings. Incredibly, the personal savings rate in this country went below 3%. You may have read it in the papers 2 weeks ago, and Japan saves literally 2 or 3 times more than we do. And we need personal savings in order to get the industry investment going. So for those reasons, I don't think that this is the tax reform bill that I could in good conscience support.